Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. We are now going to start our Finance Subcommittee meeting. So good afternoon and thank you for joining us. I now call the Finance Subcommittee of April 12th, 2023 to order. Moving down to public comments, we are now open for our public comment section. Madam Deputy City Clerk, are there any public comments this afternoon?
Yes, good afternoon, Mayor. We do have one online, Rafael Menace.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council, Treasurer, staff, and members of the public. This is the point where we'd be making comments on the item D1, right?
No, this is the public comment section. So these are for items not on today's agenda.
Okay, in that case, I have no comment for items not on today's agenda.
Okay.
We do have one more, Irma Ruport.
Good evening, Mayor, committee members. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Mayor, I'd like to make a general statement about consultants and contractors. Should I wait till item D2, or can I just go ahead and give you my general statement?
This would be for all items not on the agenda. So if you have a general statement, this would be the time.
Okay, I'll make it really quick, Mayor. My concern is, as much as I've been coming to the City Council and in the past, I'd like to ask the City Council if they could bring back some procedure, institute some kind of an evaluation for all consultants and contractors hired for the city to do work. Past performances and the current and future performances, and also keeping in line with all of that, the contract that they were signed for, and maybe mid-year or quarterly evaluations. Mayor, just for the fact that we've hired people, don't complete the jobs, and I think instituting some kind of an evaluation so that we can make sure that they're meeting the conditions and requirements that are on the contract. And if it's not too late, let them go and hire somebody else. I know last year we hired a consultant that the city let go years ago, and I won't make it detail, but it's there, and I brought it up, and because the person hasn't been there for so long, didn't know about the consultant. That's no excuse. I think we need to do our homework a little bit better than that. And that way we can just, make sure that what we contract for and consult for, we get and bargain for and pay for. That's all, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comments?
No, there are no more public comments.
All right. Since there are no other public comments, we'll move on to our business items for this afternoon. We don't have any consent items either. So I'll move on to our business items this afternoon, which is item D1. I'll introduce Finance Director Markeisha Guillory to introduce our first item, fiscal year 2023-2024 General Fund Baseline Budget. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the Finance Subcommittee, staff, and members of the public. Markeisha Guillory, City's Finance Director, and I will be presenting the fiscal year 2023-24 General Fund Baseline Budget. Next slide. So staff's recommendation is for the Finance Subcommittee to receive a report on the baseline budget and provide recommendations that we will bring forward to the full City Council at the special meeting on April 25th. Slide. The topics of discussion for this presentation will include general description of the purpose of the budget, budget development process, also the general fund baseline budget and the components that make up the baseline budget, and then we'll talk about next steps. Next slide. So just a general overview of the purpose of the budget. There are four main purposes that a local jurisdiction's budget serve. One is that it's a policy document, meaning that it indicates the services the city will provide during the fiscal year. It's a financial plan and outlines the cost of city services and estimates revenue sources and how those services will be funded. It is an operations guide and indicates how services will be delivered to the community. And this is mapped out in the budget document, mainly in the departmental sections. And then lastly, it's a communications device for the readers and pulls together a number of information related to the budget and communicates the city's overall priorities and funding sources. Next slide. So the city goes through an iterative process for developing its budget. This is the first step where we develop the baseline budget and build on it from there, all the way through presenting a budget for adoption in June. We start with the current budget for this year will be the 2022-23 mid-year budget as our starting point. We then make adjustments to the mid-year budget for known factors. So that includes things such as a potential cost of living adjustment, any trend analysis or growth rates that we are aware of in our major revenue sources, any growth rates in our benefits. Those are just some examples of known factors that we factor into the current budget to build our baseline budget for fiscal year 2023-24. We also work with the departments, we being the city manager and finance director, work with the individual departments and they submit their requests for changes to the baseline budget. So we evaluate those through an internal process where we review all budgets and bring forward some of those changes for consideration if they impact the baseline budget. And then the finance director and city manager works together to consider the department requests for changes to the baseline. And that leads to the preparation of the preliminary proposed budget, which goes to the city council for its consideration. Again, this is an iterative process. We usually go through about 3 or 2 versions before we get to the final budget that is presented for adoption. Next slide. So for the next section, I'd like to just give an overview of the general fund baseline budget and the components that make up that budget. So we'll go into some details of those various components. So before we get into that, just wanted to point out what framework we work within to develop the city's budget. So we do have a policy, which is the structurally balanced budget policy, and it applies to the general fund, which includes the main general fund, as well as the Measure S 2006 and the Measure S 2014, all considered general funds. We create a proposed general fund operating budget that is structurally balanced. And what that means is that ongoing revenues support ongoing expenditures. So when we start the process of developing the baseline budget, we strip out all of the one-time items and break it down to just those recurring revenues and recurring expenditures. And this is done to ensure the sustainability of service and to stabilize expenditures over time. Next slide. So some of the examples of the recurring budget items, which are included in the baseline budget, includes those revenues that can be expected to continue, that we expect to continue to receive on an annual basis over the next 5 to 10 years. That includes all of our major tax revenues, fines, licenses and permits, charges for services, those revenues that we can basically rely on to fund our ongoing services. And then we have our ongoing or our recurring expenditures, which are ongoing for city services and activities. You can also think of it as permanent expenditures. So salaries and benefits, utilities, maintenance, and then mandated agreements that we may have with other governmental entities, such as Contra Costa County, which provides animal and library services to the city. Next slide. On the flip side, we have non-recurring budget items. These, again, are excluded from the baseline budget. And the non-recurring revenues would include a one-time sale of property or grant awards. Although some grant awards they span multiple fiscal years, they are one-time in nature and not counted as recurring revenue. For non-recurring expenditures, these are related to activities that are not ongoing. So we have a number of one-time items in the current budget, such as council-directed initiatives that are expected to be completed over the next year or two. Staff recommended budget additions for a number of special projects. And then also capital improvement projects in general are considered one time. They may span multiple fiscal years, but they are one time in nature in that the main cost of acquisition, for example, that is a one-time cost. And then the ongoing cost might include maintenance and operation. So overall, the acquisition cost for capital projects is considered one time. Right. So some of the highlights from the fiscal year 2023-24 general fund baseline budget is that the city's baseline budget position is not balanced at this point, as you can see in the staff report, and we'll talk more about that. And what that means is that the baseline revenues are exceeded by ongoing revenues are exceeded by ongoing expenditures. The baseline budget does not include any major changes to any of the assumptions. So there are not any major changes proposed to service levels or to staffing. So all of those are pretty much the same as the last fiscal year. And then lastly, I wanted to highlight that our major revenues continue to be stable and can support our ongoing expenditures, but they're growing pretty moderately year over year. So there's a bit of imbalance in keeping up with the expenditures. Next slide. So here's a summary table of the general fund sources and revenue. As we can see from the fiscal year 22-23 baseline to the year that we're presenting is we're looking at a 5% increase overall, which equates to $1.2 million. Next slide. And for the general fund baseline budget uses or expenditures, we're looking at an increase overall of $1.6 million or 7% increase. So comparing the two fiscal years, we see that fiscal year 22-23 estimated a net deficit of about $577,000, and the current baseline budget is projecting a $983,000 deficit in budget. And so I'll go into the components of the revenues and expenditures over the next slides. So here is just a depiction of where the general fund dollars come from overall. And as we can see, our tax revenues make up the majority of our income for the city. That equates to about 84% of the total general fund budget comes from tax revenues, and mainly from property tax and sales tax. Next slide. So looking at the details of those components, our property tax is our ad valorem tax, and it's fixed at a 1% assessed valuation. We receive the property tax for the basic 1%, and then we also receive residual and pass-through funding from the redevelopment property tax trust fund. You'll see a breakdown in the table of those two. For the basic 1%, we are projecting a 1% increase. This is based on the forecast or projections that are provided to us from the property tax consultant, HDL. We're seeing a significant increase in the RPTTF, comparing last year to this year or the year going forward. We're expecting an additional $908,000 or a 61% increase. And that is because we have one final payment made that we'll need to make for former redevelopment debt. And a larger portion of the RPTTF will flow into the general fund. And overall, we're expecting a 19% increase in property tax. Right. For our sales tax, the city of Pinole has a sales tax rate of 9.75. The city receives the standard 1% or what is known as the Bradley-Burns sales tax. We also receive 1% from the combination of the Measure S 2006 and 2014. For fiscal year 2023-24, we're expecting an increase of 1%, and this is based on projections provided by the sales tax consultant. So what we're starting to see in sales and use tax as a whole is that it's starting to stabilize and level off since fiscal year 2021-22. And the year prior, where we saw large spikes in sales tax. And a lot of that was due to certain segments, such as consumer goods, where during the pandemic, we had lots of people who moved to online shopping, which increased significantly. And then the purchase of electronics goods, which really spiked during that time as well. So we saw really large increases at that point, and it's starting to stabilize for the next fiscal year and over the next 3 years, according to the projections. For our utility users tax, this is the 8% tax levied on telecommunications, gas, and electricity. We're assuming an 8% growth rate here. And this is based on trend analysis. We can continue to see substantial growth in the gas and electricity segments. And this is just basically due to the rates in those industries. We do use resources published by PG&E, for example, to help inform our estimates around this, in addition to looking at our trend analysis. Next slide. Our franchise tax is an average 5% tax levied on corporations and utilities that supply gas, electricity, cable, television, and refuse. And we have franchise agreements that have been in place for quite some time with those various entities that provides those services. We're assuming a 1% increase in this category, and that's based on trend analysis. For intergovernmental taxes, this includes the motor vehicle in lieu fee, which is tied to property tax. We receive the projections from our property tax consultant, HDL, which assumes an 8% increase for the current fiscal year. And by the way, for the projections that we use that are provided by the consultants, we are within pretty close range of receiving close to what we budget based on those projections over at least for the time that I've been here over the last 2 years. We've been either met the target or exceeded the target there. Next slide. For the transient occupancy tax, or what is also known as the hotel tax, it's a 10% tax that's levied on short-term rentals or lodging. For this one, we're assuming a 3% increase. The dollar change is pretty low. There are a number of opinions around this. This seems to be not growing as fast or picking up as much as industry experts thought it would following the pandemic. And so we just took a conservative approach to this and based it on industry trends, in addition to some of those other resources as far as what's happening statewide with TOT. Next. And then we have our business license tax. This is assessed on all businesses doing business within city limits. We have a flat dollar rate that is levied on businesses, and then it incrementally increases depending on the number of employees. We're assuming a 5% increase again, based on trend analysis as well. Next slide. Charges for services includes public safety charges. This is mostly received from the dispatch services provided to Hercules, the cities of Hercules and San Pablo through the cost sharing agreement with the Pinole Police Department. We're assuming at this point a 2% increase based on the current formula. The agreement is set to expire June 30th this year, and the new agreement is actually underway. So this figure could change a little bit by the time we bring the budget forward to be adopted. Slide. So other revenue is pretty much everything else. It includes our fees, permits, interest income, reimbursements, miscellaneous revenues. We're assuming an 11% decrease, and this is mainly due to those fees that were generated by the fire department will be shifting from the city to the Contra Costa County Fire Protection District. Those are mostly fire review fees. All of the others are pretty stable. So we're not expecting any other decreases other than in the fire review fees. All right. So that was an overview of the general fund revenue. Then to go into the components of where the general fund dollars go or expenditures. This just depicts the various categories of expenditures. As we can see, personnel costs are the majority of the budget. That percentage is about 60% at this point. It was higher, but now that we have less staff with the fire department transitioning over to ConFire, it makes up about 60% of the budget for personnel costs. So for salaries and wages, this category is based on the current staffing level of 116 full-time equivalent positions. Prior year was 132 FTEs, so 16 of the staff moved over to ConFire under the new fire services agreement. And so we are expecting an 18% decrease, which is the net of two things. So one is the reduction of 16 staff moving over, and then a 3% increase for a potential cost of living adjustment is also built in for a net decrease of 18%. Next slide. And similarly, benefits work the same. So our benefits include retirement and fringe benefits, which includes our medical, dental, workers' comp, and so on. And we're assuming a net 17% decrease again from the reduction of staff. And then we're seeing a 5% increase, or informed that medical benefits will increase by 5%. And then a significant increase in our workers' compensation premiums of 14%. Which brings us to a net 17% decrease. Slide. For operations and maintenance, this includes our professional services, our utilities, interfund charges, and our materials and supplies. We're assuming a net 22% decrease, and mostly because the expenditure reductions due to the transition of fire, and 10% increase in general liability insurance premiums brings us to a net 22% decrease. Next slide. And it's not in the staff report. We'll be sure to include this in the next version for the April 25th meeting. But the city did enter into an agreement effective March 1st with the Contra Costa County Fire Protection District to provide fire services to Pinole residents. And the budget that we've included is this, the 5.6 that you see there, and it's based on the contract, which is a 5-year contract. This is the year one amount that ConFire provided to us. So we have entered that into our budget. Next slide. So capital outlay includes our non-major asset acquisition and improvements, and it includes operational capital such as computer equipment and office furniture. It does not include major capital improvement projects. This assumes a 19% increase and is mostly to account for the price of goods. So we have not added any additional to the baseline. It's just accounting for those increases in prices for those various products. For our debt service, we have one. We pay for the principal and interest on the 2006 pension obligation bonds. And the budgeted amount is based on the debt obligation schedule. So we have the schedule that shows all of the future years as well, but the cost of issuance did increase for fiscal year 2023-24. So you see a little bit of an increase there versus last year. And then lastly, we have our transfers out. This is mainly subsidies to non-general funds for services that are provided but are not 100% cost recoverable. So the general fund does provide a subsidy to the recreation fund as well as the cable access television fund to support those operations. We're not assuming any growth. We've kept this flat over the last few years, just consistent with past practice. But as we move forward, we may need to evaluate if we need to increase the subsidy to recreation in particular. So that is a general overview of our baseline budget. Just wanted to provide not only the budget itself rolled up to the categories, but to give you or to provide some context on the details of what makes up that budget in the form of the revenue and expenditures. And with that, we will be preparing the baseline budget for the full city council to present that at a special meeting or budget workshop on April 25th. So we'll present the baseline budget and capital improvement plan and receive council member requests for additions and deletions. And then tonight, we're also looking for any recommendations that you may have that we would bring forward to the full city council as well. And from there, we will prepare the preliminary proposed budget. That concludes my presentation. I am available for any questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Director Guillory. We'll go to committee questions first, and we'll start with Treasurer Swearingen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm still totally not clear, so these questions may be old and already answered, but I understood that we're supposed to be receiving a $2.5 million influx from the county to help us with the Station 74, but I don't see that anywhere in this proposed baseline budget. Now, I'm sure it's someplace else and I'm not seeing it. So if you could enlighten me on that, it would help. Thank you.
I believe you're referring to the Measure X that's going to help offset the cost for the second fire station, right?
Yes.
So the amount of the $5.6 million that you saw in the baseline budget is net of the costs.
I assume that. But
Yeah. So the cost is
anywhere, and I couldn't relate. So this is net. So we're actually using about $7 million on that fire.
7.3 million.
7.3 million
Yes.
per year to operate that fire station.
Correct.
The only other comment I had was the net surplus deficit last year was $577,000. This year it's $983,000. Is that going to amortize itself out over the 5-year budget? Because it seems to me I saw where that kind of starts to come back even, if I remember the past analysis of the budgets, because to continue with this kind of a loss is something that we're definitely going to have to deal with. I mean, the city's going to have to deal with, not me, but the city's going to have to deal with.
Yes. So we are reviewing internally. We're doing department budget reviews, which includes the city manager and myself and all individual departments. So we're reviewing all the details of the budgets going through and going to be identifying some measures for reducing that deficit. So we'll be looking for some budget balancing measures. We're also making sure that there aren't items that's included in there that are in fact one time. And then there are also some increases that we may need to take a look at as far as the operating budget. So we're working through that now in the form of our internal department budget review meetings.
All my questions at this time.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Toms.
Thank you. And I want to thank Director Guillory for answering some questions that I had earlier in the day. I would just add to that request that we want to make sure that 19% increase in property tax is for this next fiscal year it's my understanding that anything on the ROPS is completely separate from this budget document. So we don't have what we get to pay those ROPS expenses, and then the revenue is just completely separate.
That's correct, with the exception of the residual and the pass-through that flows into the general fund.
Right, right. Okay, so I'm just trying to figure out how we got to 19%. I don't think I'm gonna completely grasp that now. I'm looking at the amount that we have that has gone for ROPS payments from last fiscal year to this fiscal year is about maybe about $2 million difference. So we would get 19% of that. And then there would be a growth factor of property tax that isn't through redevelopment. So I think that's something that I just want to comprehend that a little bit better. I don't think we're going to resolve that here, but I think ongoing discussions.
Yes, and I've
Good.
noted your question. I'll get
Thank
back to
you.
that.
Next question is on the uses for Contra Costa Fire Protection District agreement. It states that it's a 0%, that there's no change in the budget. Shouldn't that come up if the salaries are coming down because it's changing line items? Shouldn't that be equalized by this contract and have that line item show a higher percentage?
So we separated them out. So it's just comparing last fiscal year to this fiscal year, which is why you see the 0 for that table in particular. So yes, some of the other line items did come down in the personnel, and we showed those, but some of them were also netted out by increases in some areas. So while it was reduced by personnel costs and non-personnel costs, such as professional services, we did see increases in some areas. And then there are a couple of items that the city had to retain for fire.
Mhm.
So abatement being one of them.
Mhm.
And that's around $120,000 budgeted for that. And then utilities and some maintenance is also still in the budget.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other, did you want to say something, City Manager Murray? Do we have any other public comments or any public comments?
Yes, Raphael Menace.
Thank you.
Justin, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Good, because it muted me right after I unmuted myself. So that's why I wanted to check. So I've got a few comments here. First, I think the presentation was great and it covered some of the stuff that wasn't in the staff reports. I'm wondering if it could be uploaded to the city's website after tonight's meeting is done. Secondly, with regards to table 1 on page 6 of 78 in the agenda packet, I think that there's an error for the percentage change in transfers out. I don't think that's a 100% change. I think it's or at least the baseline is, there's a mix up somewhere because it says the dollar values change is $1,420,955, but it looks like the actual change is just $1. So not quite sure what's going on there. More broadly speaking, I went ahead and made some comparisons between the long-term financial plan and the FY 22-23 budget, which is on page 64 of 237 in that budget, and the fire services agreement. And I noted that the main change in table 1 compared to the long-term financial plan's projection is an expenditures increase of $730,098 and a reduction in transfers in of $581,716. And I'm assuming that the reduction in transfers in is due to fire being shifted off to the fire contract, the section 115 trust fund no longer being allocatable for that purpose. But I'd appreciate some clarification on that. I think it might be helpful in revision of this table and future documents to include the long-term financial plans estimates for the baseline as sort of a third column or as a separate table to do a comparison. It was a pretty close match with regards to revenue. I think there was just a $5,000 $30,963 difference in revenues compared to the projection, but expenditures, it was a pretty major difference. The other thing that confuses me a bit is that the Fire Services Agreement seems to be quite a bit less than the final adoption of contract value, which was $6,107,445 on page 24 out of 955 of the October 10, 2022 City Council meeting agenda packet. But the Fire Services Agreement expenditure here is $5,674,781. So I'm curious as to why we have the increase in expenditures of $730,098 when we have a less expensive fire services agreement than was estimated in the original contract there. I think that's all the questions for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comments?
No more public comments.
Director Guillory, did you want to respond to any of those questions that you may have heard?
Sure. So on the first question on page 6 of 78. So the table, there is an error there that we discovered after the fact. It doesn't impact the bottom line numbers, thankfully. But for the transfers out, the dollar change should be 0 and the percentage change should be 0 as well, because that didn't change, but it didn't. It wasn't captured in the total. So those numbers, the total was still accurate.
Okay.
And then as far as the comparison to the long-term financial plan baseline budget, there are a number of factors that went into that. So yes, one on the revenue side of things is we had a higher amount budgeted for the transfer in from the pension trust. And with the change in fire, that amount is lower. We are still working out that number because the city is still responsible for the unfunded liability of the fire staff, as well as what we call normal cost. So we have to look at the difference between the two because the city is still basically on the hook or responsible to pay for those portions of the pension costs. So it will not. We don't expect it to be the 2.4 or so million that we projected in the long-term forecast. But it may not be as low as we're showing now, which right now we're showing this $1.9 million as a transfer in from the pension trust. So we're working through that calculation.
And I'll add just a little bit of information to respond to another question. We do have some updated information about some of our costs that have changed our baseline budget now relative compared to what we had in the long-term financial plan forecast. And Director Guillory mentioned some of those in the presentation. So for instance, our employee medical benefit costs, we now know what those actual costs and rates are going to be, and they're higher than what was forecast, what we expected them to be. In addition, a number of our insurance costs are higher than we expected them to be. And we have some updated assumptions about costs for supplies and materials. I think Director Guillory mentioned regarding capital outlays, we're expecting something like a 19% cost increase year over year. That's just an inflationary cost increase. We're not expecting to buy any more equipment or furniture or anything, but based on inflation, those costs are going up. So there are a number of reasons why our new baseline budget assumptions of what our costs next year are going to be are higher than what we had included in the forecast, which was prepared about a year ago now.
Thank you. And did we speak to the comment around the fire services agreement being reflecting a higher number in this current table than it does on the agreement itself?
So I can't recall the details there. I would need to take a look at that, but it could be that. Well, I don't want to make any assumptions because
Okay.
I'm not sure what Mr. Menace. So I'll go back and look at that.
Thank you. Just
Yes.
next time, by the time it comes back
I
to
will do
council.
that.
Thank you. All right. Are there any other public comments? Not seeing any. We'll go
Nope.
back to the council for questions, or excuse me, the committee for questions. Mayor Pro Tem Towns.
I don't have a
Comments?
question, but it's an observation. And this goes back to when we were looking at the fire contract and the comment that we received from LAFCO. And LAFCO had suggested that we look at doing an annexation of, that we annex into Confire. And I'm familiar with the distribution of taxes in other areas where they are part of Confire, where there might be a percentage of the property tax that goes to the special district. A lot of times it's, could be anywhere from, 18%, which is what Rodeo Hercules Fire Protection District gets from the taxpayers in those two communities. There's other areas where it's about 18%. And the reason I'm bringing this up, because I'm looking at our total property tax, which is baseline at 5.6 million. And our contract for Confire, which is also 5.6 million. So if we were to look at doing an annexation at some point in the future, it would likely be the full 18% would be a pass through. And I know that baseline is going to jump again next year when we completely retire our debt from redevelopment, and then we'll be getting the full percentage, but it's still, a high number. So I think I just plan on keeping my eye on that, because I think long-term sustainable fire services for beyond our agreement period and beyond the time in which Measure X is in existence. We need to make sure that that's sustainable. And if it rises too much, above the property tax amount versus what the contract amount is, that's something that we need to just keep our eye on. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? All right, well, this was a report, so thank you so much, Director Guillory and all staff who were part of it.
Thank you.
Next, we'll go to item number D2, which is an overview of our draft fiscal year 2023, 2024 through 2027, 2028 capital improvement plan. Hello, Director Mishra and Ms. Carr. How are y'all?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, members of the Finance Subcommittee, city staff. We'll be presenting an overview of the draft capital improvement plan projects, starting from fiscal year 2023, 24 through 27, 28. So our capital improvement plan is a 5-year plan used to identify and implement the city's capital needs. In the draft CIP, there are 31 capital projects and 7 in the infrastructure assessments category. For the upcoming 23-24 fiscal year, there are 29 projects that are slated for work and the 7 infrastructure assessments. In the last 2 years, we've added a new category to the capital improvement plan, which is our infrastructure assessments. The other categories have remained the same, which are facilities, parks, sewer, stormwater, and streets and roads. Here we have a summary of projects that are in the draft capital improvement plan. We have 4 projects that are slated for completion before the end of the fiscal year. 2 of them have already been completed, which is the local road safety plan and the sanitary sewer master plan. And then the other 2, which involves installation of a charging station here at the public safety building parking lot, and then some surface improvements at Pinole Valley Park and Fernandez Park. Those 2 are slated to be completed hopefully before the end of this fiscal year. There are 2 new projects that you'll see, which are both grant funded. One is Pinole Smart Signals, and the other is the safety improvements on arterial roadways. They're both described in the project sheet, but just an overview. The Pinole Smart Signals project is one that is a combination of projects throughout the county, and Contra Costa Transportation Authority is taking the lead on that application. They've been able to secure some funding through OBAG 3 to turn some of the signals, especially on our arterial roadways, into smart signals. And the signals that Pinole would be looking at if we wish to move forward would be ones on Appian Way and San Pablo Avenue. And then the safety improvements on arterial roadways is also grant funded through the Caltrans HSIP program. And those are some safety improvements on a couple of our mid-block crossings, which were identified through our local road safety plan. There are 2 projects that have been removed. And then lastly, there are 3 projects that were basically combined into a single project because the idea was these are all some type of road rehab. And so we decided to combine those 3 into a single project. So since this packet was published, there have been a few changes as we are continuing to work through this draft. One of the projects was inadvertently missed, and that's been added back in. That's Pinole Valley Road Improvements, which increased the budget by $100,000 for the upcoming year. One of our other projects was mistitled. And then another project that I want to discuss is our pedestrian improvements at Tennant Avenue near the railroad. So we had preliminary engineering funding through West Contra Costa Transportation Authority for this project. And then we were able to leverage some of the design work that we did to apply for OBAG 3 funds for this project. And we will be bringing forth to council a resolution of local support at the next meeting, which describes in detail the funding agreement that would be in place with MTC. So because of that news, some of the budget has changed for that project. And we're leaving that as unfunded for right now until we meet our obligations for filing the application with MTC. We've just been, I guess the word is preliminarily selected for funding for this project, but there is a match that we would need. And we're hoping to secure that match through another grant funding source, which we'll learn about more later at the end of this week. And we hope that we'll be able to secure that match. So, so moving on, if all of these changes are added in, we have a draft budget for 23-24 in the amount of $14,307,853. And the unfunded portion, which is listed here as almost roughly 1.3 million, that is coming from the RO 1902 project that I just described. But if we're able to secure funding, then all of those projects listed would be funded projects. Overall, the 5-year project, as it appears with the project sheets that you have, the 5-year total is roughly $54,145,599. And again, there's a portion of it which is unfunded, partly because of the RO 1902 project. And then the other large unfunded project is our San Pablo Avenue Bridge project. And in relation to that project, we are still working through preliminary engineering to be able to go back to Caltrans and secure additional funds through the Highway Bridge program. So as Director Guillory mentioned, we'll be kind of going in tandem with the finance department and how we move towards final proposed CIP. So here today, we hope to receive recommendations from you all. And then we have a special budget workshop scheduled with the City Council in April. And then once that meeting takes place, we hope to take the proposed or draft version of the CIP to the Planning Commission and then present the preliminary proposed to Council in May, a revised version in June, and then later the final proposed target date of adoption for City Council is June 20th. So I mentioned here is the budget summary by fund. We are still working through the numbers for the remainder of the 5 years, but wanted to give you the most up-to-date number based on the changes that I discussed and the various funding sources that are listed here. You can see we have our grants category, which captures any funds that we receive through WICTAC, Contra Costa Transportation Authority, the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, and Caltrans. Those are kind of lumped into one. And if you recall, most times when we receive grants or expect to receive grants, they're usually parked in a different fund, but we just wanted to represent what the grants portion of this budget looks like. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll start with Treasurer Swearengin.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that report. And I'm not sure if I heard right, but we were getting like $180,000 from WICTAC for that Tenant Avenue project. Did you say that had been pulled, or is that we still, the money that we need is in addition to the money that WICTAC's been?
Yes, so we were awarded $100,000 to complete the preliminary engineering.
Ooh.
And then,
They
so
dropped
we
it.
spent about half of that, and we were able to get far enough in design to prepare and submit an application for the construction portion of funds through OBAG. And now the match that we would need, which is roughly about $345,000. Coincidentally, WICTAC is going to be having another call for projects, which they'll be going into detail on Thursday. And because this project, once a project already qualifies for STEM funding, you can always go back. And so we hope to apply to seek the additional match that we need for the construction portion to get additional WICTAC funds.
Now, is this a street improvement or is this a trail improvement?
This would be a closure in the Bay Trail gap, but it would be an improvement to the railroad crossing as well. So it would improve the connection from the Bay Trail.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem Toms.
That project that is the trail improvement, that's redoing the bridge or not?
The Railroad Avenue Bridge?
Yeah.
No, this project does not include removal or replacement of the bridge,
Okay.
but it does connect to that bridge.
Okay, just understanding that I spoke to somebody at flood control on another topic. And I understand that that is a choke point. So we might want to just, loop back with flood control district to find out if, since we're doing that work, is there any opportunity to address that?
One thing I will mention in past conversations with the flood control district, we've had trouble or historically understanding whose liability that bridge is, if it is for removal. And we've tried to find documents. We haven't had much success, but I'll be happy to reach back out and determine what we can do there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll go to public comment. Deputy City Clerk Stone, do we have any public comments?
Yes, Raphael Menace.
So I have two comments here. First off, how does the active transportation plan identified projects link into the capital improvement plan? Like, will the active transportation plan projects be showing up in the non-baseline budget, or are they somewhere in the CIP that I just didn't see them? Because I tried looking through there and I don't think that I saw them, but it's entirely possible that I missed something. So I'm curious about that. And then my second question was whether it would be possible to consolidate a couple of the unfunded project categories, in particular UF017 and UF016, the Shale Hill retaining wall and sidewalk gap, and the sidewalk gaps more generally, into sort of a San Pablo complete streets category, and whether doing things that way might make it easier to apply for and gain grants and regional funding and higher than regional funding, perhaps. Because I know that's been a point of concern that's been raised by a few people in the community and some of the city's commissions as well. And I'm also wondering whether there's anything people in the community could do to help with the grant writing process for UF016 in particular, because that shale retaining wall, it's not just a hazard to pedestrians. At some point, the shale is just going to fail and completely block the roadway. And if we're lucky, there won't be any cars on the roadway at the time. And if we're not, well, hope that I'm not going to be driving through that segment of roadway just then. So yeah, that's definitely a safety concern as well as quality of life and arterial / traffic flow issue. And those are my comments on the CIP. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comments?
There are no more public comments.
All right, we'll go back to the committee for comments or questions. Treasurer Swearingen?
Just to make sure, are we talking about all of the rest of this presentation, or are we just talking about what was presented to us by?
Anything on the capital improvement plan?
Okay, thank you. Several. Start with page 30 and 31. I'm sorry, 31, not the modernization. The HVAC system for the building here. Talking about $150,000 to do just the HVAC on the roof. Is that correct?
Join us, please.
Okay, the HVAC for City Hall may not be that, maybe for the senior center, is that?
That's what I'm talking about. No, the
Yeah.
senior center, I understand that. That, you know, we have to take that air conditioner off. We have to replace the roofing section. My next question was going to be replacing the roof in the same process that we're going to do the HVAC, or are we good on the roof? City Center, City Hall.
City Hall, we have done a inspection of the roof. It requires some replacement of the City Hall roof. But the HVAC system is actually got rehabbed in the last year.
Yes.
So we don't need to spend on the HVAC, but we definitely have to spend some money on the roof.
Okay, this is an associated cost. So that's what I thought we had done, the repairs on the HVAC.
Yes.
I remember seeing all the little
Voices.
local units in everybody's office. So, okay, then I understand that. Okay, don't go away.
Just
To
real
add-
quick, I think we want to make that adjustment. The current, I think why there is some confusion is the current CIP says that both systems need to be replaced. I think that's why you have that question. It does say both systems need to be replaced.
Okay, sure. And then I also want to add, Project FA 1702 talks about the citywide roof repairs and replacement and references the inspection that Director Mishra was just referencing.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I'm sorry, we didn't have your report in front of us to go through, but that's fine. You did an excellent job. On page 38, we have $200,000 that we set aside 5 years ago for the upgrades on Pinole Valley Park soccer field. Page 38. And we also set aside, not funded, but budgeted another 200,000 for the soccer field too. That may have been removed from the budget at some point in time, I don't know, but in essence, I know it's going to cost a little more than that to do that soccer field and to do it correctly. But what I'm concerned about is soccer field 2 is a shambles. And I don't know if there is any budget or any proposed budget any longer to either refurbish that field or give it another use. It is a park, you know, part of our park system. And right now it's basically, and I've said this before, it's become a dog park. And we call it Dog Park 2. And people who don't want to go to Dog Park 1 because they feel their dogs get abused at Dog Park 1, go to the other soccer field. So I just wonder if there's anything still in the budget. That was my question.
I believe it is in the budget, but this particular project has been deferred until the completion of the park master plan. That's Yeah, we still have Major S funding for this. It is budgeted, but we're not working on it right now.
Okay, so the $200,000 that we're going to spend is basically tearing out the grass and putting new turf in, is that correct?
That's right.
And also new nets, I hope, because they're pretty bad
Yes.
too.
Yes.
And there's already, children out there practicing and planning their summer entertainment on the soccer field there. So it'd be nice if we got the nets as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I'll see probably from our operation and maintenance funds, we can do the nets.
Okay, thank you. Going on to page 56. The San Pablo Avenue Bridge project over the railroad. And knowing that we are going to have to raise that bridge up to meet the standards at height from the railroad tracks now, which increase the cost of that project. I had heard, well, number one, we've got $30,000 as a bottom line here, and then on page 76, we have $30 million. On page 56, we have 35 million. On page 76, which the two don't agree with each other, so we should, fix that up so that they agree. But I also think that for $35 million is an old number. And might possibly want to look at that again and adjust our request to the state for funding for that, because I think that's going to go up to probably $40 million before we're done. And if we're still in the design stages, we've been in design stages now for 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, currently we're doing the preliminary design and environmental. Those two are going concurrently. And right now we have submitted a bridge, conceptual bridge type selection to Caltrans, and we're waiting for them to confirm. Once that gets confirmed, then we're going to move forward with for the next stage for final design and requesting funds for construction.
Okay, so maybe by the time the council sees the budget, we'll have a more realistic number on that. In a couple of months.
Yeah, we'll probably update those numbers. We'll have our construction estimates, a little better than what we have,
Okay,
and most likely you'll have a little better number.
okay. Next. I put a note on energy audit. Is this something we do as a regular basis, an energy audit? Every year, or, I'm sorry, I thought somehow that's budgeted in here, and what does that consist of? I'm just not sure what that consists of.
So that's a capital project. And actually, we put in CIP to complete an energy audit of all the facilities we have, city facilities, and to see where we can actually change our operating times and all that to save energy. But that's what it was meant for. We have a consultant come and audit our usage of energy and see opportunities to upgrade or change to LED, some different kind of lightings and all that.
But is that going to be a one-time audit?
Yeah, it'll be one time, but the implementation will be probably over several years.
Yeah, and that's fine. Just wanted to know if we're going to be spending that every year or.
Many,
And if I may just add a little additional info, that the energy audit is the shorthand for that project description, but the scope of it has increased over the past couple of years. So it's really energy efficiency and conservation, energy generation, and energy storage. So all of those 3 components will be within the scope of the assessment.
Okay. Park master plan, we have $150,000 worth, I guess, I assume, of improvements, which probably includes some things on Fernandez Park, but I don't see anything in the next 4 years. Is that to be a later assumption, or is it going to be an annual for park? Because parks maintenance is something that continues on and on. It doesn't go away.
Yeah, most of the park maintenance is being done by city's public works operation and maintenance. And this park master plan is actually going to give a little more detail. It is being under preparation right now. And for other parks like skate park, there is some funded, unfunded, but some activity has been planned here in the CIP as well. And but operation and maintenance budget covers most of the maintenance for parks.
Have we done an inspection of all of our park properties?
Now that's the park master plan is going to, wrap it up and do that inspection, take a inventory of all that and provide us some recommendation.
Because we
Going
have
forward.
some park locations that are just open space.
Yes, those are not part of the park master plan, evaluation.
But they demand maintenance like anything else.
Yeah, they do
Weeds,
sometimes now,
you know.
yeah, especially as the weather kind of changing on us. We are actually investing a lot of time and money towards some of our unmaintained open spaces.
Okay, St. Pablo Bridge, Freya House renovations.
Just to clarify, can you, because there's some confusion, the Parks Master Plan is the $150,000.
Correct, yeah. So that budget amount, that $150,000 isn't for capital improvements to the park. That's to fund the park master plan itself, which we've selected a consultant for. We're having a kickoff meeting tomorrow to develop the park master plan. The park master plan will tell us what capital improvements are needed. But as Director Mishra mentioned, most of our park maintenance is not budgeted in the capital improvement plan. It's contained in the operating budget because it's, it's recurring, ongoing work that's performed primarily by public works staff. So it doesn't, our routine park maintenance activities, which includes, refreshes to some facilities, is not in the CIP, it's in the operating budget.
Okay. That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Toms.
Yes, thank you for the report. I would just ask that it be uploaded to the agenda website so that we can take a look at it. There were some of your pages that would have been really helpful if they were also in the staff report. And wondering if there is the possibility of getting a balance of the different funds, pots of money that we have. That would be useful to find out because, we've been doing a lot of development that pay park dedication or park impact fees. It'd be good to know what we're looking at for balances in those various pots. And then one more question, and I think I lost it. Oh, what's the timing of the park master plan? Getting that in?
We think it's going to take a year to develop. So starting now, completion in a year.
Okay, so this time next year, we'll be looking at implementation of that park master plan, and we may end up adding some projects into the CIP. So I would just ask that we keep that in mind for our timing for our consultant to get that work done early enough so that we can get started on implementing.
Yeah, thank you. Director Mishra will communicate that to Director Rogers to reconfirm that timeline.
Okay. And then one last question is, some of the park open space where we're having to take out trees for safety reasons, where is that budget coming from?
Currently, our operation and maintenance budget do have some funds allocated each year for tree trimming. So we are actually tapping into those funds for now. But this removal of eucalyptus trees right now for this season actually is much more than what we had budgeted. So we would be requesting more funds to be added to that and going forward.
Okay, and then I would just, not related to the CIP, but I'm hoping that we can come up with our initial damage estimates and see if we can get some reimbursement for removing the trees that did fall.
Yes, we have actually gathered all these. We had a meeting with the FEMA and Cal OES. And we have compiled all those costs that we're going to ask for reimbursement.
Okay,
And we are seeking reimbursement for all the tree trimming, and they are agreeable that that's a part of the cost.
okay, and they did extend that time as far as the emergency to include up to April storms.
Okay, thank you.
So just a little additional information, as Director Mishra mentioned, we met with FEMA and Cal OES officials. The mitigation work that we're conducting right now on the eucalyptus trees in the 2 unmaintained areas. As a result of that meeting, we got a positive indication that our mitigation costs would be fully reimbursable. That's all reimbursable through the original emergency declaration, which was the December to January storms. We don't need to submit anything additional for the subsequent emergency period. Staff will add as a capital project for City Council's consideration to the next version of the draft CIP, a tree mitigation project, because as Director Mishra mentioned, we've been able to handle the tree removals and trimming that has been required to address the most urgent trees as part of our operating budget. But we do have some advice from a consulting arborist that suggests that we might want to remove additional trees over the course of the next 5 years. And the magnitude of that cost will make it qualify as a capital project.
Great, thank you. And that's
Great, thank you. Just wanted to, first of all, say thank you for your presentation. Specifically, it's always nice on the grants portion to see that list get longer. So just wanted to commend the department on that work, as that has been a priority of the council. And I think we are reflecting that as we grow and grow the CIP plan. So thank you again for that. Last meeting, we had a conversation about our grants management policy. And I thought perhaps it would be a good idea for the finance department and public works department to integrate language around that financial policy into the grant section. It would probably help just for folks reading the CIP. And I know typically they change every year, or sometimes they do. Just that consistent knowledge and cross training of understanding there. And just a suggestion, but I don't have any recommended language. I'll let you all work that part out. I wanted to ask a question around what came up in public comment about merging some of the unfunded projects and the projects we have. How do you all go up? We talked about methodology for CIP, but how do you all consider the merging of projects outside of council's direction?
In terms of merging projects, there are opportunities at times when certain projects are funded through using either general funds or Measure S funds. It's a little bit difficult to do so when we have grant funded projects. So for example, we're working on a arterial rehab project, which is funded with city dollars. In order to add on nearby projects around there is not hard when we're getting bids, but the nature of grants is such that we can't always combine the projects, because then it would defy the grant requirements. So it becomes difficult, especially in road projects, because those are the ones that we tend to get most of our money for if we are to combine. But for certain projects, Director Mishra and I have been discussing internally certain smaller projects that are slurry seal for some of our roadways where we're using city funds. We are looking at combining those into one large bid so we can knock them kind of out together instead of doing separate bid solicitations. So that's one option. And then I also wanted to address the comment, the public comment regarding the active transportation plan that was recently just awarded. So we'll begin our ATP. We don't have projects to add here, but similar to the park master plan, we will get to a point where we'll be able to add new projects. And the concept of complete streets came up in terms of combining those projects, and complete streets is one component of the active transportation plan of what we want to see in that plan. So we'll certainly be be seeing those projects sometime, hopefully next year around this time, to be folded into the next year's capital project.
Thank you. And the energy audit, I can't find the page it was on, but we were referencing it earlier. It had a number of $50,000. What was that spent on this year? 31, thank you.
Yeah, we haven't spent anything on that yet. It is for
I'm sorry, Director Mitchell,
Yeah.
just 1 minute. I just want to make sure folks know how we follow.
not a problem.
So there's an energy upgrades and there's an energy audit. And I don't want to confuse folks. The energy upgrade, I think, had $150,000 and the energy audit had 50,000. Oh, it's of course at the bottom under infrastructure improvements. Let's go to. So on page 58 of 78, IN 2201 energy audit.
So that's the 50,000, where, as City Manager Murray mentioned, the audit will look at facilities for opportunity of, from the standpoint of efficiency, conservation, and generation, and we have not begun that effort. And the other project, I believe, because this one is more of an infrastructure assessment, and then we also have the energy upgrades, which is FA 1902. Is that the one? And that's referencing the heating, the HVAC systems here at City Hall and the Senior Center. And as Director Mishra mentioned, we did spend some funds, approximately $99,000 on rehabbing portions of our heating system here at City Hall. And then now there's 150,000 additional funds programmed for next year to continue to do some more rehabilitation work. And then while we're on the topic of energy upgrades, I'll just mention page 59 of 78, which is emergency power for critical facilities. That one also it speaks to a portion of energy upgrades in the sense that we will evaluate our critical facilities and then use funds to, either if there's a need for an additional generator or if we need backup battery storage, any of the facilities, that will go towards funding that. But there's 30,000 programmed initially for an initial report, and then 170,000 in the next year kind of proposed for any improvements that will, or any infrastructure upgrades that will need to happen.
Okay, thank you. Generally, the term useful life comes up around certain projects. One project in particular is referenced as the dog park bathroom. I think it's unfunded right now, but it says that it's reached its useful life. Can you explain what that term means to you? Because it's a little nuanced for me, so I'm just wondering what that says.
Yeah, in fact, that either end of life cycle or end of life basically means that it is at a point where it needs to be rehabilitated or replaced, either completely or a portion. So for example, if we were talking about City Hall, where we've been able to, I guess, rehabilitate a portion of the heating system versus replacing the complete unit. So when something like our bridge, our San Pablo Avenue Bridge, has reached the end of its useful life because we've had inspections from Caltrans saying it's past the point where we can do small work to repair the bridge. It needs to be completely replaced.
Okay. And then just a question on the pedestrian improvements tenant corridor project you mentioned in the presentation. So this is a project that was a specific council directive and initiative outside of the CIP process, but we have integrated that, is what I'm hearing from your presentation. Is that correct? We've integrated that project into the CIP as an unfunded project?
Actually, long ago, or I want to say 2 years ago, the project was a funded project because we had received grant funds through WICTAC, STEM funds, to do just the preliminary engineering. And once we would complete that, we didn't have any funds to move forward to construction. Likely what would have happened is once we would have had the design, we would have tried to secure funding and come back to council and say, hey, we were able to leverage grant funds. We have a design now. We can either go into construction or continue to seek funds. And with the grant funds that kind of got the project started, we were able to use the design work to secure additional funding. That's similarly the case. There's another project here called Appian Way Complete Streets. That's one where we also have preliminary engineering funds through STEMP. And once that project is complete, we'll only have a design. But what that design helps us do is go out there and have grant ready material to secure additional funding. And at which time we hope to, secure 100%. But when we can't, we do come back to council to seek matching funds for what we've been able to secure.
Okay. So just to make sure I'm not confused, what I'm hearing, and maybe I'm mentioning two different pedestrian improvement projects on Tenet Avenue. One is closer to the wastewater treatment plant, and that's around pedestrian safety by the railroad tracks
Yes.
and perhaps the bridge also, or close to the bridge.
So the Bay Trail connects
To
to
the
the bridge, but we're not doing any work
On the bridge.
on the bridge.
Got it. Okay. But the Tenet Avenue improvements along Tenet Avenue closer to downtown Pinole, Pear Street, Plum Street area, are those two projects merging now?
Those two projects are not merging, but I think you're talking, the safety improvements on tenant that we've been discussing with council.
Yep.
Those are not listed here because we're already moving forward on those, and those are being funded through the operating budget.
Got it. Okay. That's where my question was gonna go. So that is not a CIP project, but it is something that our city's working on.
Yes, correct. We are working on, I believe council funded those projects through one of the meetings where funds were taken out from an existing project and those projects were
Okay.
funded.
So
And
those are
yes,
fully
we are
funded.
working on those projects right now. So that's not projected for next year. That's why it is not there.
Okay. So then my question goes, Director Guillory, does that project impact that baseline budget we just talked about earlier? The project around the Tenet Avenue improvements?
No,
Okay.
because capital is considered one time, so it's not factored into the base.
Okay, perfect. Just want to make sure. Thank you. Okay, got that cleared away. The last question I just wanted to ask is in regards to our Parks Master Plan. So we are in that process. It makes sense to me, the delay of some of the park affiliated projects due to the Park Master Plan. How is that decision point made though? Because I'm hearing the need for some of these projects and they've been on for a long time. How is that decision point made around which are paused and which aren't?
For the parks, you said?
For anything that references, I think the only thing I saw was the soccer field.
Yes.
How was that decision point made to delay that? Or is that a recommended?
Yeah, that was recommended because that project has been there for a few years, I believe, the soccer field. But I believe my city manager can go ahead.
Sure. I actually think it might predate your time, Director Mishra, with the city. That I think the improvements to the primary soccer fields at Pinole Valley Park, I think that capital project actually predated my time with the city. And before that project was implemented, the city council decided that we wanted to have a parks master plan. And at that time, and as part of an adoption of the CIP, the city council decided to defer that project until we had a parks master plan. The city council could change that decision at any point. I think particularly regarding the second soccer field, there was a question of whether that was the best use for that space. And thought that maybe the city did not want to continue to have a second soccer field there. And therefore, for the improvements that had earlier been conceived for that second soccer field, it felt particularly appropriate to defer making improvements to that second soccer field because the park master plan might reveal that it didn't make sense to have a second soccer field. Less true of that primary soccer field. I mean, we don't know the results of the park master plan, but it seems very unlikely that there'll be a proposed different use. So if the city council would like, as part of this new CIP, I think it seems appropriate. And Director Mishra, tell me if there's a reason we should think otherwise. I think it'd be fine to move forward with a capital project for the renovation of the primary soccer field.
No, that makes sense. Thank you so much. Again, great presentation, and just want to reiterate some of the things in your staff report. If they can translate over to the CIP, especially the history and status points, I think would be very valuable. There's just so much here. Sometimes it's that kind of context is really helpful to have in the plan. Deputy City Clerk Stone, I think I did not go to public comment yet, or maybe I have, but do we have any others?
Yes, we did, but we do have one more that popped up. Telephone caller, last four numbers 5748. Please go ahead and identify yourself and city of residence.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, my name is Anthony, and I'm a longtime taxpayer and senior citizen of Pinole. And I just wanted to mention that you got the time clock working for a public comment, but you've got few callers calling in, and it seems like it's been an ongoing problem for people that can't engage in public communications like this that you would like at a higher level, because the phone number isn't posted on the Zoom screen, nor is the web ID number, only at the beginning of the meeting. And there's a lot of senior citizens out there that are not capable or handicapped or not tech savvy to go into your website to dig out the numbers to partake in this discussion. So I don't know who's responsible for that. One of the city clerks, we have several, or somebody at Pinole TV, but the numbers are still not posted up there. It just shows the date and that it's the name of the meeting. But that being said, where does the overtime and maintenance for Public Works Department and other staff like fire, well, not fire anymore, I guess, or police fall into what category? And being that there was the reduction in the budget of 18%, what caused that reduction of 18%? And some of the comments made by the mayor and someone else regarding that, the situation with the downing or the removal or tree cleanup. Who decides, who's the decider in that as far as what gets prioritized under the budget, or whether it's going to be with overtime or what have you? Case in point, along the Pinole Valley Dog Park, Adobe Road Dog Park, the Pinole Valley sign is knocked down right in front of the fire station. It's been like that for several weeks now, and it just needs somebody to go and fix it. And I know Public Works drives by there every day, if not every other day, as well as the fire department, right on that corner of Adobe and Pinole Valley Road, that big Pinole Valley Park sign. There's several trees in the barbecue Thornton Grove across the dog park that have been down for months, if not years. And how can we rent out and charge fees to people that want to use that barbecue grove when it looks like an atom bomb was dropped in there, and none of the old trees, not the recent trees, but the old trees have been cut down, not to mention the bathrooms are out of.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comments?
Yes, Irma, report.
Again, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Just really quick, Mayor and committee members and staff and everybody. I'm very concerned about the park maintenance contract for a year. I think we need to bring it up to speed, bring it up to date. Whatever can be done, do it now. The fact that we wait a year for this is unheard of. I mean, it's just ridiculous. I think we need to bring some of these plans up to date also. And if we're fully staffed, there's no excuse. If you need more people, fine, but if, fully staffed, let's get the work done. And also, I'm very proactive with grants. I took my grant training this past week with Supervisor Glover. There's a new grant coming out, Heller Canyon Grant, where the East County is involved in. They're expanding the role now to Central and West County. Mayor, and everybody. Proactive, let's go out for grants. We need the money. We need the work to get done here in Pinole, and we just can't sit back and wait for someone else to do it for us. For what I understand with the grant training that I got, all staff and everybody should be looking out for some grants out there. If you don't know how to write them, get a grant writer. That's what I've been taught. It's a good program. I'll bring it up to speed and maybe I'll pass it on to all of you so that maybe we can produce some kind of training like that to bring some of our taxes and money that we pay out there. And I think our city of Pinole deserves a lot more than what we're getting. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments?
No, there are no more public comments.
All right. Do we have any final comments or questions from the committee?
No, none from me.
All right, Treasurer Swearingen. Okay. Any other comments from our staff?
No, thank you.
I have one last comment. We'll be meeting internally to provide the fund balance for the next time, and then also trying to figure out if there are other projects that could be moved and we could rely on other funding sources. Particularly our impact fees is what we'll be looking at. So in the next iteration of this, you might see some fund balances change from Measure S to impact fees.
Okay. And the next time this item will come to council is April 25th as well?
Yes.
Thank you. Yep.
Can
Mayor
I
Pro
add
Tem
just
Thomas?
one item? I know on affordable housing projects, a jurisdiction can defer the collection of the impact fees until right before occupation. So it'd be useful to know on the impact fee balances, if we have deferred any of the fees to the other end. And, if we're able to figure out, project what's going to be coming up. Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much. Any final comments from other staff members or our city manager? All right, not seeing any. That means we can move on to, again, there's no action that's requested on this item. The subcommittee is an advisory committee, which makes recommendations to the council. And that is our last item for this committee meeting. So I will adjourn the committee meeting at 4:34 p.m. Thank you.